That's right, everybody. Thank you for sticking through the show if you have, or if you've just jumped to the time code. Welcome. This is the Batman review. That's right. John and I are going to talk about the Batman. We're going to keep it spoiler free at the very beginning, give our thoughts and impressions, and then we will be very clear when we're going to start discussing spoilers and the details of the movie. So if you want to just hear what we thought, if you haven't seen it yet, feel free to tune in for a little bit. We will be very clear when we start talking about spoilers. We are talking about the Batman, released on March 4th, 2022. Written and directed by Matt Reeves, who is the director and writer for the Dawn and War of the Planet of the Apes movies. He directed the horror film Let Me In, and he was the director of Cloverfield, which I feel like a lot of people forget about because that's I feel like a J.J. Abrams project for a lot of people.
Yeah. Who was Cloverfield Lane?
10 Cloverfield Lane was a different guy. I don't remember who did that, if you want to look that one up for me.
Sure.
But yeah, so written and directed by Matt Reeves, which is awesome to see. I love having a writer-director. I feel like that's often a very indicative of what the project is. You're able to give this person a lot of freedom from the, if I learned anything from, film school, it's that, the creative process begins with the words on the page, and how those words are translated into film is a big part of the director's job. But a lot of times you have these big scripts written by David Goyer or fucking Kurtzman and Rossi or Roberto Orsi and that turn into
Chris
projects. Chris
Terrio.
That have the final project. You start to see a little bit of the discrepancy between the script and what you're seeing. So good for you, Matt Reeves. We talked about it briefly earlier, but the Dawn and War of the Planet of the Apes are fantastic movies. I've not seen Let Me In.
Me neither.
Cloverfield, I think, is a really good movie. I think that it is a cool experience, but not maybe necessarily a great film. I don't know how you feel about it.
Not as big of a fan. I do like 10 Cloverfield much better.
Oh, yeah. That movie's awesome. But that
was directed by Dan Trachtenberg.
Okay.
Yeah. Did you know Damien Chazelle wrote the screenplay for 10 Cloverfield? He was on the...
Really? He did?
Crazy. I wonder if you got any La La Land inspiration from 10 Cloverfield.
Well, 10 Cloverfield Lane was a movie that was called The Cellar that was then given the Cloverfield moniker to be part of that universe, but it was an independent film. So that actually doesn't surprise me that Chazelle wrote that movie, intending it to be like a small budget indie project.
That movie's insane. John Goodman's terrifying.
Great movie. Excellent movie.
Yeah, you and I saw that together earlier on in our friendship. Yeah.
We did. I haven't seen it since then. It's kind of a stressful ordeal.
It's not a good quarantine rewatch, that's for sure.
No. There is, for the Batman, though, there's a secondary writing credit for Peter Craig, who I had to do a little bit of digging to find out about this man because I've never heard of him before, but he wrote... Because
you haven't watched The Town enough times to see his name pop up in the credits. Yeah.
He wrote one of your favorite movies of all time, The Town. He
gets the secondary writing credit because he was attached to the Affleck version of this film, right?
Really?
That's what I thought.
Interesting. That would make sense.
I thought he stayed on for that transition between Affleck and Matt Reeves. I think this movie is 90% written by Matt Reeves.
Yes. Well, then I'll just jump. So let me get through this real quick. So secondary writing credit for Peter Craig. He did The Town. He was a lead writer on Bad Boys for Life and The Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 1 and 2. And then beyond that, a bunch of stuff that didn't really seem super consequential. But one of my top 10 favorite movies. But one of the big trivia facts I've got down here is that coming from Imdb Trivia, a lot of this stuff could be totally positive. There's some strings of truth. You take what you want with a grain of salt. It said when Ben Affleck was set to star and direct, the villain of the film would have been Deathstroke, played by Joe Manganiello, and the screenplay would have prominently featured Arkham Asylum. Matt Reeves had enjoyed the original script that Ben Affleck had been preparing, comparing it to a James Bond film. However, he opted not to use it as he wanted to make a more noir detective-driven story. So It sounds to me like they had a script. Maybe this Peter Craig guy was attached to it, but it sounds like they didn't use at all, if any, of that original Affleck script.
None of it.
Yeah, so that's what.
Listen, I still want to see that movie, though.
Sure, I mean that's the ultimate what could have been story for superhero movies.
It sounded like the pitch for that movie was Affleck was going to direct Die Hard in Arkham Asylum with Hans Gruber's Deathstroke, and Batman stuck in there by himself.
And it was
That sounds
about
pretty
like the
rad.
rogues. It was like the whole rumor was that it was going to predominantly feature the rogues gallery. So it was going to be like we were theorizing that it could have been a Long Halloween
Right.
sort of
Or the
adaptation.
Arkham Asylum comic
Arkham
book
Asylum,
and
sure.
video game. Yeah.
So yeah, that's why I think it's interesting that Peter Craig is given a writing credit on IMDb, because it sounds like they didn't use any of that original Affleck script, but this guy was still somehow attached to the Matt Reeves project. So we might not know that. We might not know that full story until way later on down the road.
Plus, I think after Affleck and Craig turned in their script, Warner Brothers did some rewrites where it seemed like they kind of kicked Craig out of the rewriting, and Jeff Johns did some rewrites with Ben Affleck. And that's where I think Affleck started to lose the juice for wanting to continue to do the Batman stuff. Is one of his writing partners got shown to the door. So
yeah. The Batman is rated PG-13 for strong, violent, and disturbing content, drug content, strong language, and some suggestive material. Don't want to dive too deep into this right off the bat, but I did feel it was pertinent in this case of the Batman to include the MPAA rating, because this movie's very dark, which we'll talk about. I personally am shocked that it's a PG-13 movie. I think that this could have easily been rated R.
Which is exactly what everyone said about The Dark Knight when that came out too.
Sure.
Yeah.
At 100,
this is by far the darkest Batman movie, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. At 175 minutes, the film is the longest Batman film to date, and it's the third longest comic book movie of all time, behind Zack Snyder's Justice League and Avengers Endgame. I think Avengers Endgame is 10 minutes longer than the Batman. I think that it's something like that. And obviously, Snyder's Justice League is like 4 hours and something, right?
It's like 2 days longer. Yeah.
It's a full 24 hours longer. Got some updates here in terms of box office. The most recent update we had today, we're recording this on Monday, March 7th. So we've had a full weekend of the movie being out in theaters. The Batman has a $134 million domestic debut. So 134 in North American theaters over the weekend. Sunday's estimates of 128 million. Ticket sales rank as the best opening of 2022, as well as the second pandemic era movie to cross the 100 million mark in a single weekend following Spider-Man No Way Home. Internationally, the Batman captured 120 million from 74 overseas markets, pushing its global tally to 254 million. And I attached the numbers here. The top 22 box office at the, for this year, the worldwide box office. The first two are Chinese movies that I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce, but number 3 is Uncharted, coming in with a worldwide box office of 271 million. And then the Batman is close behind it at 258 million. And that's only after one weekend. And those numbers are slowly going to trickle in as we go throughout the week. So this movie is doing very well financially. Very curious to see where it ends up in its theatrical run, because the Batman, unless they change their tone, Warner Brothers and HBO Max has said that the movie will be available in 45 days after the theatrical release date, which would put it around the weekend of April 15th. Sunday, April 17th is exactly 45 days after the release date.
That sounds great, because I want to see it like 3 more times in theaters, and then I can just start watching it at home.
Yeah. So, John, before we dive into spoilers and talk about the movie and all that kind of stuff, let's start it out. I want to hear from the number one Batman fan that I know, the number one DC comic book fan that I know.
Yeah.
What did you think, spoiler free, about the Batman?
I really like this movie a lot. I think it is extremely well shot. Greg Fraser, the cinematographer, who also did work on Rogue One and like Zero Dark 30, shoots Gotham in such a visceral, grounded way where you're really up into the action, and like just where like they mount the camera on the sides of the cars or on Batman's head and stuff like that when he's doing things is just so interesting and unique. I'm a big fan of this movie, man. Like it's exactly what I was hoping it would be. and it even exceeded my expectations in some other minor respects that we can get into later on. So
Yeah.
in terms of recommendations to go see it in the theater, I highly recommend it. I have seen it twice with plans to see it for a third time tomorrow. So I'm all in, baby. Let's go Battinson. What about you?
I loved it. I liked it even more the second time, and I'm planning on seeing it again a third time. The first time we saw it was in our beloved Gateway Film Center in Columbus, Ohio, and we saw it on a bit of a smaller screen. But that's what you get when you have an independent cinema. It is very much an independent city cinema, which but we had such a good time, like that. That opening night crowd was good. Like, people were into it.
We were the most hype people in the room, though. Let's be honest. We were driving the hype train.
Sure. Yeah. But
it's not as like exciting of a movie in terms of like hoots and hollers as a Spider-Man No Way Home. But there were some moments where you, John, and I were like, let's fucking go.
Yeah. It's a great movie. I think that it is a top tier Batman movie. I also think it's a top tier comic book movie, which we'll talk about when we get to rankings and stuff like that at the very end. I loved it. I mean, the second time I loved it even more, and the moments that hit even harder. I was able to sink in and kind of get even more out of the movie the second time. And thinking about the movie, it's a movie that it is really the first Batman movie since the Nolan trilogy. It's one of the first comic book movies since the Nolan trilogy there's maybe like a handful, like maybe 5 or 6, but that have really stuck with me. Like, I'm thinking about it. I want to hear what other people are saying about it. I want to hear what people are feeling, how people are dissecting certain scenes. I love hearing insight into what people are reading into the way that Batman's portrayed in this, and how they're directing the actors. And I love the interpretation. I think that Robert Pattinson did a really great job. I think that it's a very subdued Batman movie. It's very dark. Like you said, it is the darkest Batman movie. It might be one of the darkest comic book movies of all time.
I would say it's the darkest comic book movie. Like, I can't think of anything from the MCU that's darker than this.
Logan's pretty dark.
I think my ranking in darkness would be the Batman, Logan, Dark Knight.
Sure.
1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
Morbius right after that.
I can't forget about Venom and Morbius. Yeah.
Yeah. Just kidding, man. It's Dr. Michael Morbius at your service.
Yeah, I think that this movie is a great the fact that this movie is as good as it is, and it's basically kicking off an entire new universe, or not new universe, but a new interpretation of the character, I think is great. And my favorite part about this movie is what it does to set up where we're going. And I really, really enjoyed that aspect where there's, and it might be a lot of like, because we come into this universe, Batman is a character that both you and I have grown up with. We have a lot of baggage going into a movie like this. But what I really liked is that I felt like Matt Reeves was speaking to us in a way through the script and through the movie, saying like, the movie felt very purposeful, like where every little thing that they were setting up in this movie was not just fulfilling in the movie itself, like where I feel like all the side characters are great. Everyone has like a really great arc. Everyone has really interesting motivations.
Got a deep bench of side characters and actors that portray them really well without ever taking away from the fact that like this is the most Batman movie that we've had. Mm-hmm. Probably since Batman Begins. Because unfortunately, the Tim Burton movies are fun, but they're definitely all focused on the villains. And then I would argue so is The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises. So,
yeah. Yeah, and I just love where we're at. Like, I ending the movie, and we'll talk about this in spoilers quite a bit because I have lots of thoughts and I've been able to kind of sit on it and digest it quite a bit. But this is a Batman movie that really makes you think. And like, I don't know if I could say the same thing for any of the Nolan movies, because like those movies have their introspective moments, but they are still telling like a very straightforward Batman story. This movie has some themes and where it leaves the characters at the end is fundamentally different than where they begin in this movie. And that is so exciting to me for where this franchise could go from here, because I think that if they play their cards right, this sequel could be one of the best Batman movies ever made, maybe one of the best comic book movies ever made. And I think that this is certainly in the discussion of one of the best comic book movies of all time.
Yeah, agreed.
I like leaving the theater. I was so
excited leaving. Yeah.
And I was just like, and my gut reaction was like, I think it's better than Batman Begins. I don't know if it touches the highs of The Dark Knight, but I think that it's in that echelon. But just saying that, Batman Begins is fucking great. And the fact that this movie is on that caliber, if not even better, in my opinion, is high fucking praise for me personally. So,
oh, for sure. I think this movie is also such a unique entry into the franchise because it's a great origin story for Batman without having to repeat the origin story of
exactly,
this is his parents died, blah blah blah. This is cool to see. Like Michael Keaton's Batman starts out where he's already Batman, and this movie does too. But it never takes a moment to do a flashback of the Waynes getting murdered. I don't think that's a spoiler really, but like everybody knows that they die anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, this movie also, I can't wait to talk to you about spoilers and like potential for the future, because this movie ends in a place that is very like, if they were to never make another one of these movies, it would serve really well on its own.
Yeah, I totally agree.
The potential for the world they have created in this version of Gotham City is extremely exciting and very different from the Nolan movies, which is exactly what they needed.
Yes.
They needed a box office smash that did not copy the Nolan trilogy. Otherwise, it would only be compared to that forever. And this got me very excited.
This movie takes a lot of lessons from the Nolan movies. Like it is very, I mean, it's very grounded. It's very gritty. Like
he doesn't do the voice. We're Joel.
Yeah, there's a lot of that stuff. There's a lot of like, you can make direct comparisons. You can see where the Dark Knight trilogy influenced Matt Reeves in this movie. But I really do think that, like you saying that, like I totally completely agree. And this is exactly what they need right now. Is they needed something that was, because I mean, this could be a whole nother conversation, but I feel like the Dark Knight movies, that trilogy of Nolan movies, they kind of set a tone for what Batman can be on the cinema, like in the film, in a movie theater atmosphere. It's not the animated series. It's not the campier Keaton movies. It's not the ultra campy Batman and Robin, Batman Forever movies. It is a gritty, grounded, serious take on Batman. And people responded to that so positively that I can't imagine ever going back down. Like, I can't imagine that you're going to have a successful Batman property that's not like a Lego Batman and they're doing that DC. Did you see the trailer for the Super Pets League or whatever that is?
Yeah.
It's like, you can do that with Batman, but in a movie franchise, a major motion picture, like a $200 million budget Batman movie, this is kind of what I feel like we're going to get for the rest of time. And you need to take
unless you do like
lessons.
A Batman Beyond. Yeah.
Yeah. You need to take the right lessons and not take the wrong lessons. And I feel like they really learned from what the Nolan trilogy accomplished. And I thought that Matt Reeves is just, I think that this movie just like absolutely put him up in that top tier director echelon for me. Like, I think that he's great. I think that this movie is so smart. It is funny, and it's funny in some moments where it needs to be funny. It's exciting when it needs to be exciting. It's dramatic when it needs to be dramatic. It doesn't have fucking Slipknot getting his head blown up or the Joker with a damaged tattoo. It's not
well, that's the thing we need to talk about, right? Is Warner Brothers needed this to reassure us Batman fans and DC comic fans in general that, like, essentially, like, we know we didn't necessarily start out a new iteration of Batman post Nolan in the way that served the character well. We hear you. We're letting this auteur create a version of Batman that is both heavily influenced by the comics, but also influenced by all of the best versions of the film franchises.
Right.
And like, we're just going to let him cook. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I totally
It's
agree.
great.
And I think that, yeah, that's a great thing to transition into spoilers, is that this is a new Batman. Like, it feels new. It feels it like, it's so frustrating because we were talking about this earlier with like the whole, whatever the script was when Ben Affleck was writing it. I would have loved to have seen what that movie was. And I think that you agree.
I think they'll make it for HBO Max one day.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't.
It'll
I
be
don't.
with Michael Keaton though.
I don't know, but like I think that, like, now that the dust is settled, now that we've seen a Batman movie, a new Batman movie, the first Batman movie since Dark Knight Rises came out in 2012, right?
10 years ago. Yeah.
10 years ago was the last time we saw a Batman movie, and not Batman v Superman, where,
Yep.
let's be completely honest, and like, we can have our disagreements. Fans out there, you can have your disagreements. I think that all of the DCEU is built on shaky ground. And
Zack Snyder does not fully understand the DC universe, in my opinion.
has a very specific interpretation of it, which I don't
Right.
100% vibe with.
He thinks they're all gods in this type of weird mythological world, which is fine. There are comics like Kingdom Come is one of those, where they're treated like these revered deities. But his introduction to Batman, while I think Affleck is actually pretty good as an actor in BVS, is just so excessively I don't know. He's like running people over with his car. Yeah, it's jarring. Yeah, exactly. And this is a great introduction to a new version of Batman that is you're actually able to like get behind it easily, as opposed to like in BVS where he's like branding people and like, that's one of the bigger mistakes for sure.
Yeah, and I love, like, to touch on that just very briefly before we move to spoilers. Like, I actually really like the idea behind a lot of Snyder's concepts with Batman, which is the older
it's just
grizzled.
Not earned. Yeah.
It's not earned at all. It's the older grizzled Batman that's fucking done with the world, that is given up on his morals. That is an interesting take about Batman. I wish that there were like 2 or 3 movies leading up to that point. You know what I mean?
I agree.
And that is where this is exciting to me, is that I would rather see movies like this, where this is Blade Bat Runner 2049. But the Batman is a neo-noir detective film based on a superhero, that a crime-fighting vigilante that dresses up like a bat, that is a conflicted human being, and it is treated with just as enough seriousness as that is that requires. And
it's 7 if Brad Pitt wore a bat costume.
Sure. Yeah. Not as
if only at one point in the movie Batman had said, "What's in the box?" What's in the fucking box?
Yeah. So I think that, to end my thoughts before we talk about spoilers, is I think the movie's really great. I think it's top tier Batman, top tier comic book movie, but I also think that it is a awesome foundation. And now we have to spend the next 3 years of our lives stressed out to make sure that they nail the next part, because I would love to see.
I'm not stressed about the next one.
Robert Pattinson says that he signed a 3-picture deal with Warner Brothers.
So did Matt Reeves, if I remember it correctly.
So the hope is that Matt Reeves is the writer-director for all 3 of these. He sees his vision through to the end. I hope that there is very little to no studio involvement in these things. Give him all the freedom. Let him be crazy and wild with it. Let him take it in the direction that he wants to go.
Yeah.
And I'm curious to see how this Batman grows and how this version of Gotham changes over time.
I agree. I think my last little thing, that's a nice little Ben Affleck reference right there.
I know. That was why I laughed.
My last little thing before we talk about spoilers is, like, if you're a Batman fan, this movie gives you enough little tiny seeds of potential possibilities for different members of the Rogues Gallery that is just like biting into a nice aged steak where you're just ready to chew on that shit for a while, because it's like you can see a world in which every member of Batman's Rogues Gallery can exist in a Matt Reeves version, which is very exciting to me, because the big thing about the Nolan movies is we're like, they can't do Clayface in the Nolan movies. They can't do Poison Ivy in the Nolan movies. Like, they're too militaristic and stuff like that. And it's very exciting.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, this is spoiler talk now. John and I are going to get into the nitty gritty details of the Batman. So if you do not want to have anything spoiled for you, or if you haven't seen the film yet, please peace out now. This review will be here for you when you're ready and waiting. And yeah, it's spoiler time, baby.
Let's start with the big thing for me, which is, we could talk about the directing and stuff specifically later on, but in terms of spoilers, let's talk about Rob Pat.
Okay.
I think that's the most logical place that I want to talk to you about first, is like his take on Batman. And some of the things, obviously he's in the movie a ton, which in some of the complaints of the Nolan movies is like Dark Knight has more on-screen time for the Joker than Christian Bale. He is in the Bat costume for like 80% of this movie. Like, he's doing
really
Batman
impressive
stuff. It's awesome, honestly. I think it is fascinating that their idea was to take this concept that was introduced in Darwin Cook's Ego, which is that there's the Bruce Wayne persona and there's the Batman persona. And in that comic, Bruce is struggling with the balance of the two. And in this movie, there is no balance. He's just Batman all the time. Even when he's Bruce Wayne doing Bruce Wayne stuff, he's extremely emo. He's wearing sunglasses inside because it's too bright outside, because he's used to hanging out at nighttime. He's a dick to Alfred. Like, it's great. He's also like super creepy and has no social interactions with Selena because he spends his times,
he's a recluse,
spying on people and beating the shit out of people for nights on end without taking a shower. He stinks. You know what I mean? He doesn't get a haircut. Like, he's so busy being the Batman that he doesn't get his haircut. It's fascinating, I think.
Yeah.
But he's also not like the all-knowing Bat God, where like in the Justice League cartoons, like Batman just knows everything and is always one-upping people. Like, he legitimately makes mistakes and actually like doesn't succeed in stopping the Riddler in this movie.
Yeah.
Which I think is really cool for building towards the Batman that we know and love, that is a billionaire playboy by day, vigilante by night, protector of the city that he cares about, with the support from his loving companions like Alfred and Robin and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I really, really loved Rob Pat's take. I think that it's funny because like we were driving back from Columbus. Me and Carly and John Larson, our shout out to John Larson, was in the car, and they were all like napping, and I'm just driving, listening to Batman podcasts to like get people's opinions. And as we got closer to home, Larson woke up and he was like, I was thinking about the Batman. And he's like, I don't think Bruce Wayne or Batman says any line in the movie that's not a whisper or a yell. And that kind of stuck with me because I was like, yeah, I don't really remember that either. And then like when I was in my second viewing at the movie, I was paying attention to that a little bit more. He does have some lines where he's talking in like this level of volume, like a mid-level volume, and not like this. He's talking like this for some of the movie, but like,
right.
And then he does have like the, what did you do? What did you do? But like,
what have you done?
I really do think that like, that was a conscious decision. I don't think that is like, and I think that you have to, this movie lets you kind of interpret it the way that you want to. It's like, a lot of people might come out of this movie and be like, oh, he was just an emo Batman. He just like he whisper speaks everything, or he like is just so emo. But it's like, what is that character like? Think about that character. Like you said, he is obsessed with being Batman. He doesn't care about his family's legacy. He doesn't care about his name. He's a total recluse. He doesn't care about the people close to him. It's not until later in the movie where he makes the realization where he's like, I'm not scared of dying, but I'm scared about losing people close to me. Like, I didn't think I'd ever feel that feeling again.
Yeah.
And I think that this is just, I think that, I've heard a lot of podcasts and a lot of people on Twitter say this, but I think that this is going to age very well as a Batman movie. Like, because,
Agreed.
If they're able to nail the rest of this series, like this trilogy or whatever it's going to be, I think we're going to look back on this and be like, wow, look where he started. Because that's the thing, is that like the Christian Bale that we know in Batman Begins is pretty close to the Christian Bale that we see in Rises. There's a little
the thing
bit
that's
more
interesting
mental
about the
anguish,
Nolan movies is he spends Christian Bale's Batman spends most of the Dark Knight trying to find a way out of being Batman. And it's just so interesting to have the dichotomy where this one is literally like, he likes being a nocturnal animal that preys on the fear of the criminals in the underworld of Gotham City, and is like obsessed with being better, and wants, like, he's writing notes in his ledgers, which is just so cool as like a comparison to the fact that the Riddler is also keeping notebooks. One of the coolest things about Batman is, if you take a look at his rogues gallery very carefully, some of his rogues are, well, what if Bruce Wayne did this after his parents died instead of what he did? And then like, that's what he could have become, right? So like the Penguin is like what Bruce Wayne could have done if he spent his money a different way, right? And that's a rich kid. What if Bruce Wayne decided to just start mass murdering people? He becomes the Joker, stuff like that. Yeah, no, I agree. I think the whispering thing didn't really bother me, because a lot of the scenes that he does whispering stuff is like him and Gordon are like sneaking into places.
Yeah.
And like, we have to understand, he's still a vigilante, like year two. Like, yes, he spends a lot of time in rooms with police officers, but those are all like Gordon's guys for the most part. And like, they seem to be pretty comfortable with him being in there, with the exception of the opening scene. But like, when they sneak into the mayor's garage, for example, him and Gordon are like on the laptop and they're like whispering to each other about the thumb drive and stuff. And it's like, well, it's because they're not supposed to be in there. You know what I mean? Like, it's a closed crime scene that they're breaking back into. So
yeah.
Thumb drive.
Oh, this so good. We'll hilarious. Talk about that. We'll start talking about that here as soon as that. But to put a cap on Robert Pattinson's Batman, I wrote this trivia fact down. I think that this is funny. It's just Robert Pattinson's screen test before he was officially cast took place while he was in rehearsals for shooting Tenet in Los Angeles in May 2019. Pattinson had to lie to Christopher Nolan about it, but Nolan, who was no stranger to Batman and Warner Brothers, immediately figured it out. Pattinson said, quote, "It's funny because Chris was so secretive about everything that to do with his movies, and then I had to be really secretive about Batman stuff. So I had to lie to Chris about having to go to a screen test. I said I had a family emergency. And as soon as I said it's a family emergency, he said, 'You're doing the Batman audition, aren't you?'" End quote. When Pattinson was told that he won the role for Batman a day before principal photography for Tenet began, he was surprised that Nolan also knew and congratulated them, although Pattinson hadn't told anybody about it yet.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So you still haven't seen Tenet, right?
I have not.
Okay. So
the last Rob Pat movie I saw before this was Lighthouse.
Okay. So the character that Pattinson plays in Tenet is so suave and charismatic that it is so cool to see him in this movie, because like in Tenet, he's immediately likable. He's like,
right.
He's smiling a lot, and he's a guy that you would want to have a beer with. And then in this movie, he's immediately standoffish. Like he's shitty to people around him. He's always seems tired or distracted. He's very like quiet and close to the chest. And I think that was a very conscious decision. I think it's just a really cool thing that like the casting department and Matt Reeves were able to find that side of Robert Pattinson. In the same way that Christopher Nolan, another director of great Batman movies, was able to find the suave, fun 007-esque acting style out of Pattinson. So I think that this guy is very versatile. I'm imagining.
Does that give you hope for his Bruce Wayne in the future?
Yes, that was exactly what I was about to say. Is that in Tenet, his character feels like Bruce Wayne, like a Christian Bale-esque Bruce Wayne, like the Bruce Wayne that hangs out with models to put on that face. Like I'm imagining Robert Pattinson's Bruce Wayne starting to evolve into a bit more of a likable and suave person that's able to kind of like mingle in the social light and kind of like make friends a little bit and be that like millionaire playboy aspect of the character, while having the dark side that he also struggles with. And I think that that's going to be probably a really big theme going forward in these movies, is that the dual personality, not just between Batman and him, but like who his real Bruce Wayne is versus who he needs to be in public.
Yeah, especially once he meets like Vicky Vale in the next movie or something. Yeah.
Right.
Very cool. I think it's interesting. Like for me right now, Pattinson's clearly the best Batman, but I would say Bale is the best Bruce Wayne as of right now.
Agree.
And then Keaton is like a good middle tier where he has a decent balance between the two, but nowhere near as good on both ends of the spectrum as those other two guys are.
No, I agree with that.
And then Clooney is just not good. He's just not good.
Matt Reeves stated that his version of the Riddler was partly inspired by the infamous serial killer, the Zodiac Killer, who operated in California in the 1960s. Jonathan,
let's talk about the Riddler.
Let's talk about the Riddler. He's the major bad guy.
If you are justice, please do not lie. What is the price for your blind eye?
Yeah, Paul Dano is.
Wants to know how much it cost. Yeah,
Paul Dano is the Riddler. I love
fucking
this
cool,
interpretation, man.
So interesting.
So
terrifying.
Unsettling. I really like the costume. I like that it seemed very homemade. Like
you got it from an Army surplus store, which is a little spooky.
A little spooky.
Did you hear about the saran wrap thing? Have you heard about this? Okay.
Well, I mean, at the end of the movie, there's the whole thing where he's talking with his like Twitch chat, and they're like, "Don't forget your saran wrap" or something like that.
Yeah. So the idea was that like some serial killers have like saran wrapped their body so they don't leave any DNA behind.
Oh, okay.
And Paul Dano, being the fucking mega weirdo that he is, he saran wrapped his entire body for the first day of filming and realized that like you can't sweat when you're entirely covered in saran wrap. So he had to give up on doing that for the rest of the shoot. But we are supposed to believe that the Riddler also saran wraps his entire like arms and like head to keep hair from falling in places, which is just crazy. What did you think about like the digital influence where he has like live streams and he's FaceTiming people? It's a really cool, I think, splicing of modern technology.
Yeah, I mean, so I think the coolest thing about the Riddler is the way that he evolves over the movie. Yeah, because at the very beginning, he is a straight up serial killer, and that's all that you see of him is like that. And in that opening sequence, the second time seeing it, and by the way, I just want to say this right real quick, is we saw this in Gateway. It was fun. It was a good showing. Seeing it in Dolby was fucking amazing because every bass note is like your chair is rumbling and the sound is everywhere and the colors on the screen are so vivid.
Yeah, I saw it on an XD, an XD surround at a Cinemark last night, and it also just like looks so much better on a big crystal clear screen.
Yeah,
but at the same time, I would have watched this movie on like 40 millimeter if they had it.
Oh, totally. Yeah, but yeah, that opening scene is like so terrifying where he like the mayor steps away from like where he's watching the TV and you just see like he's like standing there. It's so fucking scary. It's so unsettling, and I love that is like the vibe that he puts off for the whole thing. But then like towards the end, he starts to get a little bit more friendly and a little bit more like with the different telecasts that he's doing or the Twitch streams or the YouTube things. Like he's starting to
followers.
Yeah. He's getting open a little bit more, and it's really, really interesting to see. I think it is a cool juxtaposition to a character like to the Christopher Nolan Joker, where he's secretive and mysterious the whole time, and you never learn anything about him.
Yeah, where does he live? Where does he eat? He just shows up places.
He just shows up. And that's part of what makes the Joker cool. But what I liked about this interpretation of the Riddler was that he starts out as this mysterious force. You don't know anything about him. And over the course of time, you start to realize, oh, he's got friends. Oh, he's got a following. Oh, he's
inspiring
an orphan.
The wrong type of people.
Yeah. So it's like, I really like that what I like about this movie too, is that like, I think that it does encourage the audience to play along with the riddles and play along with the mystery, where you're like, where does Batman go next? Who's the bad guy? Who's the rat? Who killed this person? Where is the Riddler hiding? It's like, it's an interactive.
Who is El Rata Alata?
Exactly. It's an interactive movie, which I think is a really cool way to take a Batman movie too. And that's a perfect utilization of Riddler. Like, I mean,
and it serves on
Jim
rewatches
Carrey should be
too,
ashamed of himself.
Dude, don't even get me started. Like, yeah,
that's a campy interpretation. So,
but still, like, I think this is such a cool way to stay true to the roots of the character, which is to leave behind these death traps with different riddles that rhyme and like spooky, like homemade stuff. Like that all is very, very in line with the Riddler. That I like from like the comics and the animated series and stuff. But
yeah, I mean, I've never known a Riddler like this before in my time.
Well, none exists like this. The darkest Riddler besides this one is the one in the New 52 run, which this movie takes heavily from as well, especially with the third act, which I will talk to you about in a little bit. But yeah, man, also just like real quick, like let's clear out the lane and talk about the Paul Dano Batman Arkham Asylum scene is like up there with the Batman Joker interrogation scene in The Dark Knight, like hands down. So good.
Yeah. And it's so fucking cool too, because like, and this is one of there are two things sorry, excuse me. There are two things which I teased on the phone earlier with you. So going to the Batman in Columbus at opening night, we went to Condado, we had double margaritas, and then we went to the Gateway Theater and I had 2 tall boy IPAs. So I was feeling nice and buzzed for the movie. And I thought that I had remembered or heard every single thing in that first screening. I didn't. I missed 2 pretty big plot details. Yeah. The first, which we can talk about when we talk about Catwoman, I totally missed that she is Falcone's daughter. I totally didn't hear that at all. I missed that completely. So when that came up
Long Halloween, so you knew that existed, right?
I mean, it's been a couple years since I've read Long Halloween, so I completely forgot that was like a plot point. Okay. So when that came up in my second screening, I was like, oh shit. I was like, yeah, she's the daughter.
It's literally the driving force of the third act.
And I guess I totally missed that aspect in the first time. But the second thing that I missed is that during that interrogation sequence, he's like, Bruce Wayne.
Yeah,
Bruce Wayne. And he's like,
Wayne.
He's the only one we didn't get.
Isn't that awesome?
And that part
so cool
is so fucking awesome, because from that moment, one of my favorite moments of the movie is like the whole like, holy shit, his next target is Bruce Wayne, and Gordon looks over and Batman's gone. And like the audience, you're like, oh fuck. Like he knows that he's Bruce Wayne. He knows his identity. You're seeing the things in his apartment. And then you get to that interrogation scene and you're just waiting for the ice. Like you're waiting for that candle to burn to the end where you're like, how is he going to reveal is this going to be the end of the dual identity? Like Batman's in year 2 of his career, and then all of a sudden he's outed.
Jigs up. Yeah.
But then you realize that it's the one thing that Riddler didn't find out. Like he didn't know that Batman was Bruce Wayne, and that like he thought that they were working together on this whole thing. Like he had this psychopathic, kind of like a, what do you call it when he kind of has like a parasocial relationship with Batman. Like he's writing these letters to this guy that he kind of like idolizes. Like he thinks that they're working together, that they're teammates or whatever. It's all made up in his head, but he thinks that they're going after all these rich like these rich businessmen or whatever. And then there's the turn and when Batman finally realizes like, he doesn't know that I'm Bruce Wayne. And then the tone completely shifts. It's so fucking cool, dude. It's such a great turn. It's a great use of tension. A great use of tension, knowing what the audience knows about Batman. Like, you know that it's like a
Oh
big
yeah.
deal, and oh my god, I love that sequence so much. And then when he starts yelling at him, and like he's like, "This is all in your head. You're sick. You're mentally deranged." He's like, "No,"
Oh my
and
God.
he's
When
so
he stands
distraught.
up and he's like, no, 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 no.
It's so cool. It's so well played, and I do think that, like, yeah, like you can tell that Dano really took inspiration from. He must have researched a lot into, serial killers and the way that these
Dark
like
place to go. And
it's a very dark place to go.
we should be grateful that he seems to be doing as well as he is, honestly, like all jokes aside, because this is a particularly dark real world character that could exist and has existed in our past that is not fun to be in the headspace of. Same with Joaquin.
Sure.
After watching it a second time, I liked him even more. Unfortunately, the Oscars are so snobby, but I would love for him to be nominated, honestly. And that
Yeah.
Oscar clip is definitely him going to be going, Ave Maria.
Yeah, and I agree. Like, I mean, like, selfishly, like, I think that he does enough with the performance to warrant an award of some kind, because I think he did a great job. But he's not given a whole lot of screen time. Like, it's a really
it's a
kind of a
COVID
test
thing. When they came back from their COVID hiatus, they filmed all of his like iPhone scenes first, because that's like the first like socially distant thing that you can do, which is yeah. But yeah,
but I
right.
just thought
He's
that,
really
like,
not on screen that much.
he's not on screen that much, but for the time that he is given, I would love to know, like, when this movie is eventually out on DVD, like, I would love for someone to cut together all of his scenes and see how long he's actually on screen, because I would wager it's less than 10 minutes. Like, but
Yeah.
like what he does with those moments on screen is so good, and the direction is so powerful. Like,
But
loved it.
he never doesn't. So like in the Bond movie recently, Rami Malek is barely in the movie and it's not serviced well. Paul Dano might not be in the movie a lot, but he never feels like he's not presence that's going
Oh no,
on. Like
yeah, totally.
the
Like,
entire thing about this movie is what Gordon and Batman say, where it's like, this town's a powder keg and Riddler's the match. You know what I mean? Like he's just like he's the topic of the town. And
yeah,
when Selena's talking to DA Coulson, he's like, everyone's freaking out about this Riddler business and they're doing hardcore drugs because of it. And yeah, he's got a presence and it's really cool. Really
yeah, I
great.
agree. Matt Reeves stated that Colin Farrell's Penguin takes inspiration from the character Fredo from The Godfather. Colin Farrell.
He's banging cocktail waitresses two at a time.
Colin Farrell plays Oz Cobblepot, aka the Penguin. We talked about it earlier.
I love that they call him the Penguin already.
Mm-hmm, yep. Crazy intensive makeup procedure. Totally unrecognizable. Doesn't look like Colin Farrell at all. He
doesn't sound like him.
Doesn't sound like him. What did you think about the Penguin in this movie, man? Because I just say I loved it.
I loved it. He's great. He is also not in a lot of the movie, but I would argue that he's in two of the best scenes. Definitely one of the best scenes, which is the Batmobile chase. But it's just such a cool take on like Oswald Cobblepot's a gangster. Like when it comes down to it, he's a gangster, and they make him like grotesquely deformed without him being like 4 feet tall and eating raw fish, and he's not like a sewer monster like Danny DeVito. Like he's just like, you could see this guy existing in Gotham, and he reminds me a lot of like the Arkham games almost too.
Yeah.
The makeup looks fantastic, and he has one of my favorite lines, which is, what does he say? Like, oh, what are you showing me?
Well, they're interrogating him. They're doing good cop, bad cop, and
good cop, bad shit, freaking cop.
Yeah. What is this? Yeah. And then Gordon is like, you want to tell me about this? And he holds up the photo of like the DA, not the DA, but
it's the commissioner.
The commissioner who has his presumably his eyes and face clawed up and eaten by rats or whatever. And he's like, "Oh, what are you showing me that for? Come on."
Yeah.
It's so great.
So good.
Yeah, it's so great. Yeah, I love the Penguin. I thought that he was awesome. I thought Colin Farrell stole so many scenes that he was in, even when he's not.
He has this weird relationship with Batman too, right? Where it's just like they're just on the wrong side, but they're never like.
He seems kind of into him a little bit. He's like, hey, he calls him sweetheart. He lets him come into his own private box with like no guards just to talk to him. Like he's very cocky. He's very sure of himself, but he also I think that he's got like not like a death wish, but he really wants to be, he's like, I'm fine with getting involved with the Batman. He's like, he feels somewhat invincible. He takes out a gun and openly tries to shoot Carmine Falcone like in front of like a billion GCPD officers. Like you get the sense that this guy thinks that he's like a god. He's like the god of Gotham. And one of the last shots of the movie is him looking over the bridge, like in the clubhouse suite or whatever, like looking down on the flooded Gotham. Like
he's going to be running the Iceberg Lounge by himself now.
And I think that like that is again, like talking about like, and that's one of the things we'll touch on here, like at the very end of the discussion is like where the movie could go and like predictions. But like, I love the idea of the Penguin being like this version's Scarecrow. Like he's just kind of ever present and always like a figure that's just hanging out. Like he's always just the gangster.
That's one of the cool parts of the animated series is that like the Penguin is like, he never really is like pulling these big jobs that get him thrown in Arkham, like very rarely. Most of the time he's a business proprietor. Yeah, shady stuff happens in the Iceberg Lounge, but he's never involved with it so that he has immunity from the police and from Batman, who can't like arrest him. But him and Batman have like this weird relationship where it's like they kind of need each other to feed information off of each other, you know? So I love the fact that he's just kind of like Batman's connection to the underworld, and Colin Farrell plays off with him so well where he's like, hey, don't worry, baby, Mr. Vengeance here, he don't bite. You know what I mean? Like it's so good.
Next I want to touch on Catwoman. I want to know how you felt about Zoe Kravitz. What did you think about her in the role? Considering that we've had lots of interpretations of Catwoman, not just including live action roles from like Halle Berry and
that doesn't count,
Anne Hathaway, but talking about like even the animated stuff, like you've been very familiar with the animated stuff. Like, how did you like Zoe Kravitz's interpretation of Catwoman?
I liked how this is definitely on Zoe and Matt Reeves, but I love how they embody like the year one version of Selena, where she's like a sex worker who lives in the seedier parts of Gotham and is just trying to like get money, but they're also playing into the Long Halloween aspect where she's specifically targeting Falcone operations to kind of steal money that she feels like she's rightfully owed since she's his illegitimate child. I think Kravitz and Pattinson have really like crackling chemistry in a way that Anne Hathaway and Christian Bale did not. Like there are a couple times in that movie where I was like, are they about to rip off the costumes right here and do it in the construction site? But at the same time, I just think she's pretty freaking badass. And Kravitz is also just like a really good actress too. Like wonderful casting. She looks like a cat when she's doing stuff. Like when she like comes down out of the skylight to like crack into the safe, and even when she's fighting people, she like pounces around and stuff. And she's great at riding motorcycles. That's important to be Catwoman, I think. I don't know. I don't want to get too rated R with my thoughts on Zoe Kravitz, but yeah, it's good stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah, I liked her. I think that she has some great moments. I think my favorite Catwoman bit from start to finish is where she's wearing the contact lens and is going through the club and like talking to different people, and she has that back and forth with Batman. That was my favorite aspect of it. I actually didn't super love their chemistry, and I didn't think that it was quick. I thought it was too quick. Like, I would have much preferred this movie. And this is one of my nitpicks or gripes with the movie, and which we'll talk about. Both of us are overwhelmingly positive on this movie. So like my gripes, my complaints or criticisms are very, very few, but I do have a few. One of them is that I think that they should have seeded the relationship a little bit more before diving into like having multiple scenes of them like making out. Like I didn't feel it. Like I thought that Robert Pattinson she is so charismatic, and the way that they decided to take Bruce Wayne's character in this is that he's very subdued and angsty. And so I didn't really feel like he was like super hot and heavy with her. Like, oh yeah, let's make out on top of this fucking Gcpd.
No, but you can
building.
tell that he's interested by the way he looks at her. You know what I mean? Not like creepily with the binoculars. That scene is tough, but more of just like when they're talking and things like that. I agree with you. I think that is the one part of this movie that is relying on our prior knowledge of Batman, which is just that like Batman and Catwoman have hots for each other. So,
yeah, they don't take much time to set
buy
it up
her
and-
attraction to him. She's like rubbing her nails on his face and like all that kind of stuff. And
See, the thing is that, and what's interesting is that, yeah, I buy her attraction, but I don't buy his attraction. Like, I think that he sees a hot babe putting on spandex and he's like, oh yeah, let's fucking go, baby doll. But like her attraction to him, he almost has this like, I don't want this to sound like sexist or whatever, but like he almost has this like dominating personality over her. Like even from the very beginning time when they meet, like he bests her in a fight and like still steals the passport and is like, she seemed like a nice girl back at your place. And she's like, oh shit, like this guy's dark and knows me and stuff like that. And yeah, one of my big criticisms about the movie is that I wish that the movie would have ended a little bit earlier, but we'll talk about the ending. But I didn't super love the last shot of the movie is her disappearing in her bike over the hill and then him disappearing on his side. Like, I just didn't think that their relationship, that was just the one thing. I did not feel like their relationship, I would have loved it if their relationship was seeded in this movie and then built upon later. But like, I actually felt like they were in love with each other at the end of the movie or conflicted about their love for each other. But like, I didn't 100% buy it.
I didn't feel like it was anything like love necessarily, but I do think that they're both loners. And I think they're drawn. There's that one thing where she's talking about like, maybe you're a lot more like me than I thought. And I think that they're just kind of drawn to their similar interests, which is prowling around on the rooftops at night. I loved the last sequence though, where she's like, I'm actually going to leave. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if she's not in the next one and then maybe comes back in the third one.
She'll be back in the next one. Take it to the bank, baby.
Well, maybe they keep it under wraps and she shows up like halfway through or something. But
maybe.
I love that she's going to Bloodhaven. Do you know anything about Bloodhaven?
Nothing.
Bloodhaven is like the sister city to Gotham. That's like a couple miles north upstate. That's where Nightwing runs the show. So like Batman runs Gotham and Nightwing is like essentially his annexed deputy to take care of Bloodhaven operations.
Interesting.
Setting the groundwork now for future Gotham installments. Pretty cool. There's a great comic run too where Penguin moves all of his operations to Bloodhaven because he's tired of fucking Batman showing up. I could see Colin Farrell. Hey, I'm moving to Bloodhaven.
Yeah, I want to talk about one of the trivia facts I missed. I'll insert it here is that Colin Farrell stated that he went to Starbucks to try out his prosthetics and makeup for the Penguin for the first time. Nobody recognized him, despite a couple of stares from people.
Hey, can I get a caramel macchiato?
I also heard rumors that he kind of method acted the role on set. Like Matt Reeves and him would have discussions on set, and he would respond to Matt Reeves in the Penguin voice to like keep up the role while he was on set.
Imagine just like Colin Farrell dressed up as the Penguin going to the Oscars.
It'd be so
that
awesome.
Would be awesome.
He accepts his award in the Penguin. Oh yeah,
walks out with the costume department, and he's like, "Hey, thank you for this award."
Next up, do you have any last thoughts on Zoe Kravitz's Selena Kyle Catwoman?
I want to see more.
I agree. I do. I think that I don't want to.
They
no
introduce
disrespect.
her characters smartly, but it leaves you wanting more for sure.
Yeah, absolutely no respect to Anne Hathaway because I actually like Anne Hathaway quite a bit, but I think that this is easily the best interpretation of Catwoman ever.
Definitely the best interpretation of Catwoman, although I love the Michelle Pfeiffer performance for other reasons. Because that's not Catwoman. She's literally like resurrected by cats in that movie. But
Yeah.
she's
Yeah,
fun in
she
that
is.
movie. But she's not really like quote unquote the Catwoman from the comics that's an actual cat burglar and stuff. Yeah, definitely Zoe Kravitz.
Next up, I want to talk about Jeffrey Wright playing Lieutenant James Gordon.
So
John, what
good.
did you think about
Stellar
Gordon?
casting. This is the one that I think we talked about this a long time ago. Like, I was worried he wasn't going to be in it enough because I love Jim Gordon as a character.
He's like
But
the second in. He's like the
he's like
most in the movie.
he's like Batman's boyfriend in this movie. Like,
It's like a buddy cop movie.
it is when at the end when Selena's like, "Who am I kidding? You're already spoken for." After she looks to the bat signal, like you can interpret that as being like, "Yeah, you and Jim are going to be spending more time together. I have no place here."
I
Um,
love it, man.
he's
I
great.
love
I
their
love that he also
relationship.
like puts his Jeffrey Wright spin on it, where he calls him like man and like
Yeah,
buddy. You know what I
yeah.
mean? Yeah,
He's like, I've been you only known me 2 years and you never show me your face, man.
I
Hey,
love when
man,
they
you
go
gotta
into
leave.
the old orphanage and he pulls the gun out and Batman's like, "No guns," and he's like,
Yeah, that's your
"Yeah,
thing.
that's your thing, man."
I,
So good.
dude, I love Jeffrey Wright. I think that Jeffrey Wright is so fucking good in everything he does.
Very talented.
Um, he is so talented. I think that this is my, I love,
Best Gordon.
yeah, that's the thing, man, is that I love,
He's the best.
maybe this is recency bias. I love Gary Oldman. Gary Oldman is one of the best actors currently working in Hollywood.
Yeah,
He is
Zach. What do we say
genius.
to recency bias? I don't give a fuck.
Uh, I just love that. I love this interpretation of Gordon. I love that he is very immediately friendly with Batman. Like he immediately trusts him. I love all of the stuff in this movie with like, there's a theme of, like, which we can talk about here in a little bit, but like the theme of like corruption in the movie is like the Riddler's going after corrupt people. He's going after people that he thinks are morally opposite to him. Like he's the people that are siphoning from the poor, and like people that are taking advantage of people, and people that are drug dealing and hurting other people. And like one of my favorite moments in the movie is like they realize that they're going after the people in the Maroney case, attached to the Maroney case, and Gordon's like, he's like, shit, I worked that beat or whatever. And he's like, he's not going after you. He's like, why? He's like, because you're a good cop. He's like, you're not
Yeah,
corrupt. It's
really
so
nice.
good. Like I just love, like, I don't think that he's a Boy Scout because he's obviously ready to like fucking, he'll fuck your life up if he gets the chance. Gordon will, but like,
Oh, for sure.
but he's also like a genuinely good human being. He sees the good that Batman can do. He sees the good that Gotham can be. Like I love this interpretation of Gordon. I thought it was fucking great, stem to stern.
Oh yeah, and like I love how we don't have to explain that him and Batman have a relationship because that's a relationship that's as old as the comic books themselves. It's just like Commissioner Gordon and Batman are allies, and he's the only one that has contact with Batman. And I
Yeah.
just love that people are like, "Hey Jim, your guy's gonna fuck this up." Like they call him like your guy or like get your guy out of here. Like it's just like he's like the Batman wrangler on the GCPD payroll. It's so
Yeah.
funny.
Next up, I want to talk not very briefly, but next up I want to touch on is John Turturro is playing Carmine Falcone.
Hey, beautiful.
Don't be a stranger, beautiful. Clearly doing clearly kind of channeling a Marlon Brando sort of
Definitely.
performance. I love John Turturro. It's so funny just imagining this dude is also playing the Jesus, which is that's my problem with John Turturro is that every role that he's in, no matter what it is, I'm always like, you were the Jesus in The Big Lebowski, and that is just so hard for me to
He's
look away from.
terrifying in this movie, though.
He is a great mob boss. It really it makes sense for the story, but like it does suck that he died because I would have loved to have seen this interpretation of the character continue on. But
Yeah.
it works for the story. I just I loved him. I thought he was great. I thought he was imposing when he's in there. He's charming too. It's like you actually get the sense that you actually might want to hang out with this dude.
One of my favorite moments in the movie that you and I both laughed at on the opening night was when Selena goes up to the penthouse. he like walks up and he's like, "Hey, beautiful," and it's like Volare in the background. Like he's just listening to Dean Martin records, playing pool with the boys. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah,
that's the whole thing though, right? Is like he's the ghost mayor that they all talk about, like he's running the show, and you can see why he's very persuasive. He literally convinced Thomas Wayne to think that he was an ally, and that cost Thomas Wayne his life. So
yeah.
really cool, really awesome.
Yeah. Last of the real main cast to touch on is Andy Serkis played Alfred. What did you think of this interpretation of Alfred? What did you think of Andy Serkis in the role?
He's good. He's not in it enough, and I think that is more or less intentional. But Andy Serkis is the kind of person that like you're casting him as Alfred, and you know that Alfred's gonna be in like multiple movies. So like,
Exactly.
he'll have more to do eventually. So like I'm not too hung up on that now. But the scenes that he's in, particularly the hospital scene, is amazing.
Yes, I think that is his best moment of acting in the movie. Maybe one of the best Andy Serkis non-CG acting moments is that scene with him and Bruce in the hospital, and like him, the subtleness of the performance when he wakes up after being on like life support and he looks over and sees that Bruce is waiting by his bedside, and he smiles with like tears in his eyes. And then it's Bruce like still being trapped in that angsty persona. Like he's like, "You lied to me." And like
so savage.
Watching the smile like fade from his face is like, it's gut wrenching, dude. It's absolutely heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And then I love that scene then culminates with like the whole, like, I'm scared to like I'm not scared of dying. Like I'm scared to lose people close to me. And then like Alfred puts his hand out and like Bruce actually holds it. And it's like, I'm so glad that they were able to have that moment of honesty and earnesty between these two characters. Like I would have been really, really disappointed if and that's the best part about this movie is that I think that this Bruce Wayne learns so much. This interpretation of Batman is a different person from the beginning of the movie that he is to the end. And it's like, it's great. Like I love how much he learns and grows and changes as a character. It's like, thank you, movie. Thank you for having character development. It's so frustrating sometimes seeing movies with like, I don't know. I think that this movie couldn't come out at a better time, honestly, for me personally, because we had just come off of seeing Uncharted, which is like just the ultimate cookie cutter movie. Not a bad movie, but a cookie cutter movie, where this movie is just like, this is fucking film, man. This is art. Uncharted is a product and it's fun, but like, God, this movie's just so good.
I also like that we get the death of Thomas and Martha via Alfred, which is that we don't know who it is.
Yeah, I love that line where
really
he's like, so Falcone killed my parents. He's like, I'll never know for sure. He's like, it could have been just some guy that was down on his luck that needed some money that killed your parents, but like, I'll never know for sure. Like, I love the ambiguity there.
Which is interesting because it seems like, are they saying that Bruce was there when they died or that they just died?
Well, we know, I don't think we get a definitive answer. Maybe they're still trying to decide how that works into the overall narrative, because at the beginning of the movie, it's like they have that whole thing where it's like, since the Waynes were murdered during their whatever campaign or whatever, but we don't get the sense to know if Bruce was there. Alfred does say you were just a little boy, like you were just a boy, you needed a father, but like he doesn't specifically say if Bruce was there or not.
Well, and Alfred also says that Thomas and Martha were on their way to the police to tell them about Falcone. Interesting. Yeah, maybe we'll find out more eventually, but I like the ambiguity for sure.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
So that's it for most of the main characters here. Something I do want to talk about is like, I want to talk about the beginning of the movie. One
of my favorite openings in a Batman movie ever.
Yeah. And something I just want to, I want to dive into really deep here is that Batman comes on screen at the 10-minute mark.
Yep.
10 minutes. That opening is fucking great. It is such a great tone setter. And I'm not even counting, like, I mean, just like the opening is great. Like, I love the Batman title cards. Reminded me very much of the Joker movie with just the giant Joker taking over the screen. I'm not sure if that's, you can read into that what you want, whatever it is, like the thematic tie, but like I absolutely loved everything in that opening sequence with the takedown of the mayor and the Riddler being in his apartment. This subtle tie of like the very beginning, it's like you got these guys looking through the goggles and you see this kid in like the ninja costume, but then he's playing ninja with his dad. And then you get the like, oh, it's Halloween night. There's this mayoral. There's so much world building in that first 2 minutes. It is staggering. You learn so much about what is happening. You learn what time of year it is, what's happening in the political aspect of Gotham, who this person is, what is it is so rich and deep. And then after the kill, you get the duct tape thing, and then it's October 31st. Gotham City. And like, this is the moment where I told you, like, when they said that was like one of the first spoken lines of dialogue. I leaned forward in my chair looking down at you, and I was like, we're gonna get Long Halloween, but you were just like engrossed so I didn't see you at all. But yeah, everything with and I made the joke earlier that it's like Blade Bat Runner 2049 or whatever. Like it very much feels like Blade Runner. It's a long movie,
rainy as fuck.
Rainy, lots of neon and like screens and like darkness and stuff like that. But the whole opening sequence, man, and I want to get your take on it, but like, I absolutely, especially seeing it in Dolby, like, and I'm sure it was really good in XD as well, but like the guy, they're showing Halloween night. He's like, the city streets are crowded for the holiday weekend and people are dressed up, blah, 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 blah. And then you get the drop head that goes into the convenience store and robs it. And then he runs outside. There's the helicopter light on him. And then it goes away and he sees the bat signal.
Yeah.
And then he turns and looks down the empty hallway. And then there's this shot repeated a couple times of villains and like random thugs looking into shadows and expecting to see the Batman. And the bass in the theater and the sound mix is like, and you've like, it's like you're like, oh, you're like waiting for him to show up out of the shadows. And that's what makes that opening sequence where he walks in at the train robbery so fucking satisfying. But I don't know. Tell me, I'm rambling. Tell me, what did you think about the opening? Like, what were your thoughts?
It's great. It's like reading an issue of like Detective Comics. You know what I mean? Like, he's got his narration. Like, you can imagine just like seeing the little like black or gray like text blobs in a comic book panel, just like, it's October 31st. The city streets are packed for the holiday despite the rain, like all that kind of stuff. Like, it's just so wonderfully orchestrated. Also sets the stage how like fucking terrified the city criminals are of the Battinson, because he's just going to show up and pummel you and put you in the hospital.
He's terrifying. He's absolutely terrifying. Like,
yeah, I love the three different crimes that are going on, and like they're all mirror matched with like looking into the shadows, and then eventually like he does actually come out of one of them, which is just so cool. And I love how he's like, you could like hear his boots from far away too. It's just like, this is like the Terminator Batman. He's just like clop, 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 and it comes out of the shadows, and you're like, Jesus Christ, this guy's terrifying.
I mean, the movie definitely has like a Western tone, like from the guitar, like the one of my favorite music cues of the movie, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. But like, I just love, he's like the lone gunslinger. He comes in here to save the day. Like, he's gonna beat the fucking pulp out of these motherfuckers. And like,
I mean, one of the best shots in the movie for me is after he flips the Penguin's car over like 10 times and Penguin's still alive, but just the guitar strung as he comes out from around the Batmobile and just like slowly starts walking over there. It's just, it looks so cool. And then it gets even better as he like bends down to look into the window, and he's like, "Hey, what's up, motherfucker?"
Yeah. So this is my last big rant before we talk about the ending and maybe some like criticisms or stuff like that. We'll end this guy up. We'll start wrapping up here. this is my thesis on why this movie might be one of my favorite comic book movies of all time. Maybe one of the best, definitely one of the best Batman movies of all time. There is. Are you ready for this, John? I'm ready. Are you ready to debut a Zach Radiovania exclusive on this podcast?
Yeah.
I'm going to coin a term. I'm going to try and coin a term. And I don't know what to call it, but I came up with either film kill streak or movie multiplier.
Okay.
So, you know, like a kill streak in like Call of Duty or like Battlefield or Halo or whatever is like you get so many kills that you then get these special things to like employ, like you get like a UAV or a cluster strike or whatever. You're doing so well that you're able to get the bonus thing, or in a multiplier, like in Galaga or Stardust or whatever, like you're shooting enough ships and getting your multiplier up, your score, or you're like playing Pac-Man and your score multiplier is going up and up and up because you're doing so well that your score is just like raising. Do you kind of know what I mean?
I get it.
So the Batman has a moment, a chunk of this movie that is a film kill streak or a movie multiplier. I don't know what I want to call it, but I'm going to try and coin this term. Because there is a 30-minute chunk of this movie that I think is maybe one of the best bits of superhero movie ever made. Ever. And 58 minutes into the movie, Bruce Wayne goes to the mayor's funeral. They're walking around the funeral. He sees the Penguin and Carmine Falcone get out of the cab. He's able to talk with Falcone and talk about like all of this stuff and like, who are you?
Dad operated on me on the dining room table.
Yeah.
Little Junior was up there watching the whole thing happen.
And then they walk into the funeral. They're going through the procession. They're going up to the altar, and you've got these people on either side that are like talking to them. Like like later on, you find out that they're Riddler goons or whatever. But like in this scene, it's just like you're going through the whole thing. The Mayor Royale comes up and talks to him and is like, "I've been trying to get in contact with your people." Blah blah blah. He sees the kid that his dad died. He makes that connection. There's the exact mirror shot of the kid looking back at him like he's Batman.
Yep.
Then you have the fucking car crash through the church going up. Bruce Wayne runs, saves the kid. And then you have the entire sequence of the DA getting out of the car with the bomb strapped to his neck, with the phone on his hand. And then you have the interrogation sequence of the Batman comes back into the place. He's talking to the guy. They answer the Riddler call. And then it's, if you can answer these 3 riddles, I'll give you the combination lock. And there's so this great whole sequence of, what's the price for your blind eye? And then the whole thing culminates with like who is the rat or whatever. And he's like, he wants you to tell me who the informant is. And then he's like, no, I can't do it. This dude with the bomb around his neck is like, I can't tell you the informant is, because he's like, I'm dead either way. Like he's so
my
scared.
family will die. Yeah, stuff
exactly.
Like that, yeah.
So he can't reveal the informant. Instead, boom, his head blows up. Batman gets shot back. He's knocked unconscious. He wakes up in the GCPD. Yep. And then they have the whole thing with the fight with then they have the fake out confrontation with Gordon where they have to do the whole like,
you're gonna have to punch me in the face.
You're gonna have to punch me in the face. And then there's the escape from the GCPD. We're still going. This all happens right back to back. They had the escape from GCPD, the grappling shot up the stairwell, and then he runs to the top of the thing, and then he sees the height of which he's about to jump, and he gets scared. Batman actually gets terrified for his life. Yeah. He straps on the wingsuit, he jumps off, he's flying. It's that claustrophobic shot of him falling. He hits the bus, he rolls off. And then it's the next shot is he's talking on Gordon on the roof. And then he's like, Rata Alada is like a rat with wings. He's like, penguins have wings or whatever. We have to go get the penguin. Then they go to the drug bus at the Penguin. They find the drugs. They find the fucking drug outpost. They're like, this was what this whole thing is still going. The whole Maroney case meant nothing. Catwoman comes in, she knocks down those 2 guys, but then they find in the back of the car the body of the Russian girl, like her friend, and then the shootout, yada, whatever. The shootout happens, the Penguin comes out, the shootout happens, he goes to find Batman's body, it's gone, and then we fucking get it, which is and then from the shadows you see the Batmobile, and then the Batmobile
spitting flames, yeah,
and then they get in the cars or whatever, and then it's the fucking best fucking car chase of all time. It is the Batmobile is like a fucking Mad Max Fury Road, like Tumbler. It's like, it is the craziest car chase. They're doing all sorts of this shit. He's playing chicken on the other side of the highway. And then there's the whole thing. The Penguin hits the car over. All these semis go over on top of each other. And then the Batman hits the fucking NOS. And then he goes, rides up the goddamn thing out of the fire, hits the Penguin's car. The Penguin's car rolls and flips and flies up. And then there's that shot of the Batman walking out of the car, walking up to the Penguin's car. And then even after that, it keeps fucking going, because then there's the interrogation between Batman and Gordon and the Penguin, and they're talking to each other. Penguin isn't the rat. They find out he's not the rat, and he helps them solve the El Rata Alata riddle, which is like the whole masculine, feminine pronunciation. They're like a falcon, a rat with wings. It's like Falcon is also a rat with wings or whatever.
Molly does the URL.
That's right. Yeah, they figured
thing.
out the URL thing, and it's like URL Rata Alata. It was like a bat is a rat with wings, and there's like URL, and they type the thing, and then they find the Riddler was an orphan. They go like orphan ? Or whatever, and then they go to the Wayne orphanage. They see the whole thing about Thomas Wayne, and then it all culminates. That entire this chunk of the movie culminates with, holy shit, his next target is Bruce Wayne
and Alfred blowing up. Yeah.
And then, he drives in his car and he's like trying to get a hold of Alfred. And then like, I've been trying to get a hold of you. Something bad is already. He's like, I'm scared something bad's going to happen. He's like, something bad happened. It happened about 30 minutes ago. And then he sees the top of Wayne Tower, and it's like the smoke is billowing out of it. And Jonathan, this chunk of the movie is like fucking nonstop. From that great. Beginning, from that funeral sequence to that ending sequence of like, yeah, you're right, with the whole the explosion of the package that Alfred gets sent. This movie is just nonstop, and this might be one of the most rewatchable sequences in. I'm gonna fucking say it. I'm really high on this movie, but this might be one of the most rewatchable sequences in movie history for me. Like, this whole sequence is just fucking perfect. It is 10 out of 10 perfect. I loved it.
Yeah, it's one of the, and it's in the middle of the movie too, which is sometimes really hard to do, is like make the middle of the movie compelling. Like
an hour in. This whole sequence takes place an hour in, and from the beginning of that funeral to the end of this sequence, I think it's only like 35 minutes. But that 35 minutes is like, if that was an episode of an HBO Max series, it would be the best episode of television ever made. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know, dude. Like, let's talk about, I mean, like, if there's anything in that little blurb that you want to talk about, but again, like I was saying, film kill streak, movie multiplier. This is like,
I think movie multiplier summed up beautifully by you. I have no comments. Like, those are all just like,
it just keeps adding. And it's like, you can see the high score in the screen, the end of the screen. It's like times 1,000, times 2,000, times 5,000. It's like, it's like, yes. And it's like, you're winning all the tickets at Dave and Buster's. It's like, it just keeps going and going and going. It is like, and that part of the movie was when it was right at that sequence with the whole, the Batmobile chase, where it's like, that is one of the best things in a superhero movie that I've ever seen. And I had to turn over to Larson. I was like, this is so fucking cool. Like, I was on cloud 9, man.
I love it. I think the movie has multiple sequences like that too at times as well. Like you get towards the end, like you have the confrontation with Falcone, brings him out, he dies, they go and look in the Riddler, and then that scene goes with, hey, Gordon, somebody just saw somebody walk down the fire escape, and he walked across the street to the diner. He's sitting at the counter alone by himself. They swarm the cafe, push the Riddler's face in the counter, and then he sees Batman in the window and he fucking smiles. And it's just like, like
it's so good. He's like,
there's great.
I just ordered a piece of pumpkin pie. They slam on the counter. Yeah, I mean, do you want, like, I touched on it because in my movie multiplier thing, but like that fucking chase scene, dude. That is cinematic. That is cinematic bliss. Like, I don't care how convenient it is with the semis falling over each other and the ramp perfectly makes its appearance. It's like, that is so choreographed so well. And the whole,
and it's shot really good too.
I got you. And that's all practical too. Like Matt Reeves did come out afterwards and say, like, yeah, we actually jumped the car through flames to get that shot. It is so fucking good, dude. Oh my God. Like, I want to
Yeah,
watch it right
I
now.
love
Just
where they
talking to
put
you. I'm about to find a 1 o'clock screening in Oakley and just go see this fucking movie again. I loved it so much.
the way that they strap the cameras to, like, the sides of the car, or like
Yeah.
positioned inside the car that you can see the rear view mirror and see a Batman like driving behind you. Really cool. Really great. Definitely my favorite Batmobile chase of all time, for sure.
Agreed.
Um, yeah. Should we talk about the where things get left off a little bit?
Yeah, I definitely think that we should touch on, we don't have to talk about every little bitty detail, but like the I think that where you talked about was a good stopping point. We like to talk about the interrogation and about the ending of the movie, because that is an interesting place where we set up the climax of the movie. So how did you feel? I think we both already said we loved the interrogation sequence. That stuff was really, really cool. How did you feel about the very end of the movie, which is Batman going back to the apartment, finding, the cop tells him about the carpet tool. He finds the plan of the bombs. The bombs go off, the flooding of Gotham City, and
I
like
love
all
the
of the end
aspect of the
stuff.
seawall. Yeah, like when you rewatch the movie too, when Riddler kidnaps Coulson to strap the bomb to his neck, you can, as it zooms out and you can see like the bright lights in the car, you can see how close they are parked to the seawall, and that the seawall is like almost full because of all the rain. Like, there's a great comic book in the New 52 run called Zero Year, which is where the Riddler floods the city and it becomes like this wasteland jungle territory with like water everywhere, and like all different rogues are running different parts of the city. This is also very reminiscent of a different Batman storyline called No Man's Land, where the United States government writes off Gotham as a war zone, and they're just like, it's an independent state and they're not going to get involved with it anymore, which is really interesting for what they could do with the sequel. But I actually kind of like the third act a lot. It's very real world spooky to me with the mass shooters and shit, but I think it's staged really well and the choreography is really cool, especially like he's like hanging from the jumbotron in Gotham Square Garden, and he puts the detonator on the gas tank and it causes there's a bunch of smoke everywhere.
Yeah.
That shot of him jumping out of the smoke to tackle that guy is just so fucking cool. Like,
Yeah.
it's just great. Um,
Yeah. So one of my nitpicks is like, and they kind of address it in the movie, but they're like, this isn't like they're like, oh, go to the last shelter. Like, they're encouraging people to go to this basically disaster shelter, which is Gotham Square Garden, but it's like a downward stadium. It's like a hockey stadium.
it's an
like
arena still.
It's an arena. So it's like the water just eventually does go down to the middle of the thing. It's like, that might not have been the best place for them to go to, but they do say, the mayor
It's
does
the
have a
highest
line where
point
she's
of the
like,
city. Yeah.
but she does have a line where she was like, this place is meant for like hurricanes or
Not
like
for floods.
not for floods. And so like, yeah, it seems like this is also an oversight of the government of Gotham, that they don't have like a place in case the seawall busts. They're just pushing these problems to the side. And that's kind of like what makes these
That's the problem with the
do.
renewal fund, right? Is Thomas Wayne talks in his campaign about how they want to allocate funds from the renewal fund to strengthening the seawall. But then we find out later that Falcone and other members of the elite of Gotham have been diminishing the billions of dollars of the renewal fund for their own endeavors. So that's why like infrastructure has not been improved. It all is like very methodically thought out by Matt Reeves, which is just like another reason why he's so genius. But
Yeah, seriously.
what did you think about the scene of him injecting himself with Bane venom?
And that was another one of my things. I didn't love that. That was one of the only things that I was like, I don't know how I feel about this. Yeah, is that so? That was my thing. I wrote down. I wrote Batman Stim Pack Venom. Is this Bane Venom? What is this supposed to be?
I think it's very clearly green for a reason. Looks like Bane venom to me, which is interesting that Matt Reeves continues to be like, some of these rogues already exist in some form or the other in this world. I love the idea of like Rob had met Bane in one of his first years and like replicated his own formula as like a last resolve.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just
Yeah,
don't love that dude.
I didn't
It's
love it. I just didn't love that his last, like the last ditch effort for him to like keep fighting was that it was just like a medical stim pack. Like I just thought that that was one of the only things I was like, we could have maybe wrote this differently. But again, like maybe that's one of those things where it's like due to the lore of the universe that might be strengthened later on down the road. I just don't know.
yeah. I also just think it's showing that like this man is willing to make himself into an animal to be able to keep fighting, which is kind of interesting. But we got to talk about one of my favorite parts of the movie, which is actually in the end of this sequence, the Batman igniting the bat flare and leading people out of
Yeah.
the arena, which then cues the second needle drop of Something in the Way by Nirvana as he is helping people out on the roof. One of my favorite moments that makes me like extremely giddy and like pleased with the movie is that he's like loading that person in the gurney that's gonna get airlifted with the helicopter, and the person like reaches up and grabs him and like doesn't want him to let go, and he like it like very quietly like does that reassuring Batman thing, and you're like, this is Batman. Like he is now like, I'm here to help these people,
Yeah.
as opposed to only helping them by beating the shit out of people that are
Yeah.
doing wrong. And I love the whole part where he's like, turns out I have had an impact on this city. It's just like a great bookend piece to like the two different monologues that he gives.
Yeah. And
So sick.
yeah, it's cool because like, and this is really the last thing that we can really touch on is the ending of the movie and what it sets up for the future is that this whole movie, the production name for the movie, like how they have like secret production names, the nickname for the movie was just called Vengeance.
Yeah.
And that idea of not just what vengeance means in a literal sense, but like what he thinks that he is from the beginning of the movie completely changes at the end of it, where it's like, I am vengeance is the first words he speaks in the entire movie as Batman. And then you have Catwoman calls him vengeance, like in a cutesy sort of way. She's like, come on, vengeance or whatever. And
the
then like
Penguin, Mr. Vengeance.
Mr. Vengeance. Yeah. And so it's like, he's known in this universe, in this movie, as like being this like dark. Vengeance has a connotation with being a very dark terminology. And then at the very end, he's like, he realizes that he needs to be like a symbol of hope for
Be
people.
more.
He needs to be more for these people. Like the scene of him, like you said, yeah, he takes the bat wing off of his chest and cuts the power line so it shuts the lights off and stops the electricity from shocking the water. And then he falls in, he pulls the flare, and then he's like helping people up one by one from the fucking like things. And the first person that takes his hand is the mayor's son. And then there's the new mayor that takes his hand, and then he starts leading them out of the place. And then, it's like him carrying bodies up to the thing and then like watching them be airlifted off. That's where I thought the logical end of the movie should have been, was that last shot of him like looking up at the sky as they airlifted that person away. But then instead we get the ending of the movie, which is I think my biggest criticism of the movie.
It's a little Return of the King-esque, which is like trying to find the best place to end it for sure.
So, I'll read this part here. The Batman has a deleted scene where Robert Pattinson met that villain, says Matt Reeves. When talking to Collider Steve Weidentraub, Reeves discussed a deleted scene from the Batman that would have made Keegan's character more integral to the film. On the deleted scene, Reeves said, quote, "There is a scene that I would have loved the audience to see that I didn't put in, not because anyone asked me to cut it, but because I didn't think that within the larger narrative it worked, that it was necessary. But it was a really cool scene that with some unseen prisoner in Arkham. There was an earlier scene where Batman, because he's getting these cards and letters from the Riddler, and he's thinking, why is this guy writing to me? I'm supposed to be anonymous, and he's putting a lens on me. I don't like that." And so he goes to kind of profile this kind of similar kind of serial killer. Quote, and you see him meeting with somebody who's obviously a serial killer himself, who, because Batman, it's not Batman's origin, but it's the origins of all these other characters. You're seeing a version of this character who, yes, when you see that unknown prisoner, you're like, well, gee, I think that's who that is. Well, that is who that is, but he's not yet that character. So another piece of casting, Barry Cogan, who plays most recently, he's in the Eternals.
Yeah, Druig.
Druig in the Eternals.
Druig
He's also in
sucks.
Dunkirk.
One of my favorite lines in the Eternal.
But on IMDb, he's listed as unseen Arkham prisoner. But in the movie, it is pretty clear that he is the Joker. That Paul Dano's Riddler is having a discussion with him. He talks about, he's like, what's that phrase they say is like, one day you're on top, the next you're a clown. He's like, and he says something. He's like, you know, what's more valuable than riddle me this? He's like, what's
The less of it you have, the more valuable it is.
a friend?
Friend.
And then they laugh together as it pans out of Arkham. And I like the concept of this scene. I think this would have worked better as a post-credit sequence and not part of the actual movie. I also, seeing it in Dolby, I think this actually looked better when we saw it in Gateway, where it was darker. But seeing it in Dolby with like the colors very bright and the darkness very contrasted, seeing the way that the Riddler, the Joker looked in that cell, I wasn't feeling it. I thought he?
Because when I saw it, it looked like he was almost like Two-Face. Like it's like his face is like exposed.
His face looks kind of deformed, but it looks like his cheekbones, it's cut up to his cheekbones. And so his like smile is like permanent.
Yeah.
I just think that this scene was clunky. I don't think it needed to be here.
The way that this is constructed, though, they can change it. You know what I mean? Like they could change what a Joker looks like going forward, which is kind of convenient.
Exactly. And I think that that's why they shot it the way that they did shoot it. I am really glad that Reeves didn't include that scene with Batman going. I like the idea of Batman being like, a serial killer is killing people in Gotham. I need to talk to a serial killer I've put away. So he goes to talk to Joker.
Yeah.
But I think that would have complicated stuff. I like that the movie is what it is. And I just think that this scene should have been either.
I would be so 120% down if the entire Matt Reeves Bat trilogy, the Joker is never able to break out of Arkham, because in this universe, Batman caught the Joker before he becomes like as renowned as he is, but he continues to go visit him in Arkham. So like he's involved in the movies in the same way the Penguin is, but he's never like the main villain. Would be really interesting. Like they just go in there and like, it's a Killing Joke. Like he just goes and talks to the Joker every now and then, and Joker's just like playing solitaire on the table, and like, you know, you get like a couple like two-minute scenes thrown in there. Would be really interesting. But because this is Warner Brothers, they're gonna have to do a Joker movie eventually.
They might not have to do a full-on Joker movie, but I could easily see the Joker being a Penguin-esque character where he's not the main build bad guy, but like I would love to see like an Escape from Arkham, he complicates the second half of a Batman movie and it isn't the driving force. Do you know what I mean? I think that would be a cool utilization.
Like Batman's like almost close to stemming like a gang turf war in the next movie, and then it's like Jim's like, we got some bad news. There's a mass breakout at Arkham, and he's like, what about inmate? Blah 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 blah, and he's like, yeah, sorry, old buddy, he got out. It's like, fuck.
Shit.
Yeah.
But yeah. So that was one of my big criticisms, is that on second reviewing, I don't like this scene. I think that this scene is not my favorite thing. I just think that it could have worked way better.
Movie.
It could have worked way better as a post-credits tease. And then following this is the Batman Catwoman sequence where
not as bad, but also not the best ending.
Yeah. I just didn't love this. I just didn't love this ending. Like you saying Return of the King, like I kind of get that. I think that the natural end of the movie is the end of Pattinson's monologue and looking up in the sky, and that shot of him like all dirty with like all these people around him. That's the end of the movie to me. And everything else after that should have just been like post-credit stuff.
Yeah. And maybe it was at one point and then they changed it.
Maybe.
To be different. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that is the Batman.
Yeah. Do we get any questions on the Gmail?
Let me open up the Gmail. Oh, we did. Look at that.
Get some mailbag questions, huh?
We did. All right. So thank you so much for writing into radiovaniashow@gmail.com. We've got some questions here from McKaylee. The first question was, do you find it interesting that this movie chose to vilify the Wayne's Arkham family instead of leaving Bruce's family as a spotless memory?
I dug this a lot, actually. I think this is one of the things that we had talked about beforehand, that they were probably going to show a little bit more of a seedier version of the Waynes. I love that they showed the mentally unstable Martha Arkham. Very interesting take on the character. But it's cool because it shows that Bruce doesn't know everything about his parents as much as he thought he did, and that he had this pedestal version of them that he's been fighting for. He loses faith for a little bit, and then that sets up the Alfred scene where he's able to get that reassured, which I think is really important for establishing that character relationship.
Right. This is one of our predictions going in, was that we predicted that the Waynes were going to be shitty people, which is a concept from, I rewatched Joker last night. And
Thomas Wayne's such a douche in that movie.
He's a big old D-bag, and I really like that concept. I like the concept of the Waynes being like a little seedy under the surface, and I actually kind of dig this quite a bit. I think that this is a concept that they'll continue to flesh out, because
I just also like that like they're not saying that Thomas Wayne's an asshole all the time in the same way that he is in Joker, but
Alfred says he made a mistake.
He made mistakes. Yeah, I like that he's
human.
not like infallible, which is really cool.
Yeah. Kaylee also asked, can the superhero genre at large, particularly the Batman franchises, ever go back to a lighthearted rendition, or has the character been irreversibly altered? I think this is a great question, Kaylee. Thank you so much for asking.
That is a good question. I think we touched on it a little bit. Like,
I think we did.
It's going to be really hard going forward in live action films to do, particularly like solo Batman movies, to do like even like a Michael Keaton or an Adam West type of lighthearted romp.
Yeah.
I don't know if they can go backwards with that. They clearly can't even do that with Daredevil. Like that Netflix show is essentially a Batman show. Like,
yeah.
I'm curious to see how Moon Knight pans out, because Moon Knight has the potential to be the first MCU thing that could be as brutal as this, but I still don't think it'll even touch.
No. It won't be. Yeah, it won't be this at all.
I'm going to say no, that it can't. What about you?
I'm going to say, like I said at the beginning, I think that the beauty of cinema is that you can take characters in different directions in different aspects. So like I said, with the whole Lego Batman or the DC Super Friends thing, like if you have a movie, like if maybe one day, and I'm dream pitching this right here. If Phil Lord and Chris Miller did a animated style Batman movie that was like in the similar style to Spider-Verse, I think you could have a more campy or funny Batman movie that's a little bit more lighthearted. But I think where we are, I think that honestly, it's a lot like discovering a fossil, like, or discovering an element. We've found what Batman works the best in film, in like in a 2+ hour theatrical feature film. I think that he works best in this sort of light, in a grounded, gritty detective story. And that's something we didn't really touch on, is that like this is the most detective Batman's ever been. Like I mean, I loved it. Yeah, and this is a wet dream for Batman fans that have always wanted him to be the world's greatest detective. Like in this movie, he straight up just solves crimes. It's great. I don't think you get that in a lighthearted aspect, or that's not the character that we know now. And so I think that for the Batman, or for Batman franchises to ever go to a lighthearted rendition, I think that it needs to just be presented in a different format, whether that's animated or whether that's like an Elseworlds tale, whatever it is. I mean, we're about to see the 89 Batman show up in a Flashpoint movie, which is going to be more lighthearted and funny. Like that's just what we've come to expect from the DCEU. So we'll see if that can work in a few months. Like
honestly, like I talked to Kaylee recently, and I like told her, I was like, even if every DCEU movie after this is like dog shit, like I got what I wanted out of this movie, and like, exactly. I'm good. Yeah, I'm set.
I'm riding high on this one for at least a few years, for sure.
Oh, for sure. Until the next one. Yeah.
The last question that Kaylee asks is, if not the Joker teased at the end of the Batman, what is the best choice moving forward for a villain in a possible sequel? You had a great point about this when we left the Batman and we were drinking at the beer stube. I would love to hear what you have to say.
Gotham's underwater. What happens to water when it gets really cold, Zach?
Nice to meet you, Batman.
I would love to see Mr. Freeze. I would. Kaylee brought up a really interesting theory, so I'm going to give all shouts to her, and it's probably why she asked this question. She said, how cool would it be if in a Mr. Freeze setup, we find out that his experiment to cryogenically freeze his wife got interrupted because of the seawall breakage.
Oh.
And so Mr. Freeze is out for vengeance on everybody because of Nora's death. That's cool. Sick. That would be sick.
Nice call, Kaylee. That's a good call. I like that.
Isn't that great?
That's really great.
I would also love to see Mad Hatter. I think would be really cool in a Batman world where drops and drugs exist. I would love to see a version of the Mad Hatter or the Scarecrow that starts like infecting the drug trade in Gotham, and people start like hallucinating and stuff like that. Would be really cool.
Yeah,
those are gonna be some of my picks.
I think Freeze is the best possible direction to go. Like you said, like
it's also the one Matt Reeves wants to do the most, it sounds like.
Yeah. And Freeze has never been done in this style before. And I think that it gives a lot of freedom and opportunity for Matt Reeves to kind of mold that character the way that he wants it to go. Yeah. I also think Mr. Freeze is maybe the most underrated Batman villain of all time.
Heart of Ice, best episode of the Batman in the animated series. Nora.
Monica.
Menage.
I also do think
we get Ja Rule to play Mr. Freeze?
Oh my god. And Ja Rule as Mr. Freeze. In addition to Mr. Freeze, I think that in a sequel to this, with where they've set up the Bat and the Cat, like the romance between the two of them and where they are in a relationship, I think that bringing Poison Ivy into the sequel would be really awesome. Especially if they take this.
Could you do Talia without doing Ra's al Ghul?
I don't know. I don't know enough about Talia al Ghul and Ra's al Ghul, but like
that's my favorite love triangle of all time is Batman having to choose between a world-renowned assassin, sex goddess, and fucking Catwoman. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
I love Poison Ivy done well. Can you imagine if Matt Reeves made a Mr. Freeze Poison Ivy movie, which the last time that was tackled was Batman and Robin, and it's like good.
That would be the ultimate one up in cinematic history, is that if he's able to do that and make it work well.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Emma Stone is Poison Ivy.
Dude, inject that into my fucking veins. Emma Stone is Poison Ivy. I don't care. That's my dream casting. I love her. I love her and everything she does. She's my hero. But yeah, I would love to see Poison Ivy done really, really well. And like you were saying, and I did some like looking up online, but like 0 Year is like the whole thing where the city's like overtaken by like weeds and plants and stuff like that.
Perfect
like
setup. Yeah.
I can also see an aspect of that where it's like, well, certain aspects of the city have been frozen over by the Freeze, who's been doing like experiments, but then certain aspects of the city have been junglified or whatever. Like I would love for the next.
It's like overgrowth and tundra, and in the middle is the Iceberg Lounge, and Penguin's like, oh, what's going on here?
Come on, baby. Let's go.
Yeah, if we don't get the Bat Boat in the next movie because of the town being underwater, I'm going to be pissed. Matt Reeves, the Bat Boat is just like a jet ski. Yeah, all right. Those are good questions, though.
Those were very good questions. Thank you, Kaylee, for writing in. Remember, as always, fans out there, you can write into radiovaniashow@gmail.com with your questions or theories or anything, and we will read them on the air. No ifs, ands, or buts. Remember, we get 0 emails, so any emails will get read. So send them in.
Yeah. We
work for tips. I'll be here all night.
Tip your waitresses.
Radiovania has left the building. So yeah, do you have any lingering thoughts on the Batman? The last thing we should do is, I have my list pulled up.
Me too.
And I don't know where I want to put it. I'm having a really hard time.
I know where I want it to be. I'm locking it in right now. This is all subject to being able to change as time goes on.
These lists are malleable,
especially with sequels and stuff. But for where it stands right now, after seeing it twice, I can just tell you that this is going to be one of my favorites that I want to rewatch. So I got it locked in my spot.
Tell me.
You want me to go first?
Yeah, because I still need some time to think.
So I think I have it at a spot that has a potential to rise or fall, but I doubt it will fall. But it has a potential to rise. I have it in my top 10 for sure. I actually have it in my top 5. I currently have it as 4. So currently my top 5 is The Dark Knight, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, Logan, The Batman, and then Thor Ragnarok at number 5. This movie is actually up to the hype. Easily S tier in terms of our rankings that we
Easily
did.
S tier, yeah. Here's my problem is that here's my top 7 is number 1 Avengers Endgame, number 2 The Dark Knight, number 3 Infinity War, number 4 The Suicide Squad, number 5 Logan, number 6 Into the Spider-Verse, number 7 Batman Begins, and then number 8 is Civil War.
I think this is better than Suicide Squad.
That's here's my thing is that like leaving the Batman, I told you I was like, I think it's my second favorite Batman movie of all time. So I think it's below The Dark Knight, but better than Batman Begins. But on this list, I'm looking at it. I think I like this movie better than Spider-Verse. And it's more what I'm looking for out of a comic book movie. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is the best Spider-Man movie, but it's also a comic booky, funny comic book, funny genre bending movie. Logan is serious and depressing and dark, but it's also the culmination of a bunch of movies. The Suicide Squad is maybe the best superhero comedy of all time. And this is maybe one of the better like comic book movies of all time. So like right now I'm having the battle is, do I think it's better than Logan or do I think it's better than the Suicide Squad? Because I think I'm about to put it over Batman Begins.
I definitely put it over Batman Begins. My top 10 right now, before this was at number 10, Mask of the Phantasm. Number 9 was No Way Home. Number 8 was Batman Begins. 7 was The Suicide Squad, Guardians, Endgame, Ragnarok, Logan, Spider-Verse, Dark Knight. So it's getting wedged in there and it knocked Phantasm out of the top 10. So,
oh my God.
I currently don't know if I could say that the Batman is better than Logan. I don't know if I've seen it enough. But I think it could easily jump up to just being number 2 right behind the Dark Knight. And then depending on how the sequels go, who knows?
Yeah, that's my problem is that like,
I don't think this is the people that are already saying that this is better than the Dark Knight. I don't know if have they fully thought things through because the Dark Knight is a transcendent film. But it could get there depending on how well it ages. Right now, The Dark Knight has aged incredibly well because of the Ledger performance.
I think I'm putting it at number 5.
Okay.
I think I'm putting it above Logan. Yeah. Here's what I'm doing right now. And again, like lists are subject to change. Time changes everything. But right now, I think I'm putting it above Logan and below the Suicide Squad because I think the Suicide Squad is such a well-rounded comic book movie that's funny and heartfelt and exciting and rewatchable. And the Batman is awesome, but it's also emotionally draining. And I've only seen it twice.
I think it's hype. I think it's so hype.
I think that movie multiplier moment that I talked about, that chunk of the movie in the middle is hype. But there's a lot of this movie that is very somber and very quiet and reserved. And it makes those moments that are hype stand out. But like, I feel like I would, if you asked me which one I wanted to after talking about it with you for 3 hours, yeah, I would love to go rewatch the Batman right now. But like on any given Sunday, like the Suicide Squad is a movie I could put on and just laugh and enjoy and be like, oh, so fun and exciting and funny and heartfelt and stuff like that. And the Batman it's an experience. It's a lot like Blade Runner. It's like, if you're going to watch the Batman, you kind of have to reserve a whole evening. But again, this list could change. Things could change around. I don't really know. It's difficult. Like I'm crazy. I think it's crazy that I hopefully this movie doesn't diminish over time for me because like leaving the Batman for the first time and then seeing it a second time, I was like, man, this movie is just climbing up the rankings for me. It's so hard. Like, I think it is such an achievement. I think they did such a great job for it. I guess the last question before we get on out of here is, what would you rate it on the Radiovania scale? Do you have a ranking in mind? Where would you rate it on the scale?
9.5.
I would also give it a 9.5.
There's a couple of third act things that keep it from being
Agreed.
a masterpiece, if you will.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you all for tuning
in
into this Batcast of Radiovania.
This cast was almost as long as the Batman.
We have not crossed the runtime of the Batman, and so we're gonna call it here, baby.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening in. You can follow us at Radiovania on all the socials except for Insta, where we are at Radiovania Show. And then you can go to radiovaniashow@gmail.com to submit your questions. Go to radiovania.com to see all of our old episodes. Like us, subscribe, give us a 5-star rating. If you feel like supporting us with a tip, all of that money goes right back into producing the podcast, whether that is sponsoring the domain, whether that's going into new audio or production stuff. We appreciate every little bit of support that you guys throw our way. I hope you enjoyed the Batman. We enjoyed talking about it. We will be back in a little while. We'll probably sneak in another fast cast episode here in the next week or so, maybe next week and a half or so. But beyond that, we're kind of just now it's gearing up time for a little bit of that Doctor Strange action. You know what I mean?
It's a little ways away, but yeah, we could start to work towards that.
That's really the next big thing, right? I mean, what's other than that coming up? The Oscars, I guess. There's the Oscars cast, but like
Fantastic Beasts in April.
I suppose. All right. John, thank you so much for joining me on this Batcast. I had such a fun time.
It was great.
Before we
talking the Batman.
Before we end this, give me the Batman quote to end this episode.
From your secret friend. Who? Let's play a game, just me and you.